This clip is not rated but is for mature audiences only. What you are about to watch contains explicit language, adult themes, violence, and may not be suitable for viewers under 18. Viewer discretion is strongly advised. You can activate parental controls from any device by going to account settings. This is for fair use only. Thank you for watching Hidden Hand.
In the last few months, the name Jeffrey Epstein has fully entered the public consciousness, while speculation on his connections to sex trafficking have long been the subject of myriad articles and videos. The finer details of his past have largely remained a mystery. For those who knew him, this penchant for secrecy is no surprise. There's one thing Epstein did make clear. The entry minimum to his highly exclusive investment firm was $1 billion. Anything short, and you'd be curtly rejected. One senior investment manager told Vanity Fair in 2011 that the trading desks don't seem to know him. It's unusual for animals that big not to leave any footprints in the snow. Another prominent financial executive compared him to the title character of the F. Scott Fitzgerald novel, The Great Gatsby. He's this mysterious Gatsby-esque figure. He likes people to think that he's very rich, and he cultivates this air of aloofness. The whole thing is weird. The mirage surrounding Epstein is carefully maintained. After refusing to give a reporter an interview, Epstein invited him to a game of chess. "Let's play chess," he said. "You be white, you get the first move." The reporter goes on to write that no one really seems to know him or his history completely, or what his arsenal actually consists of. He has carefully engineered it so that he remains one of the few truly baffling mysteries among New York's moneyed world. People know snippets, but few know the whole. Long before his rise to the highest levels of elite society, Epstein was a high school physics teacher at the highly esteemed Manhattan school, Dalton. He reportedly pushed the limits of the dress code, wearing gold chains, fur coats, and an open shirt exposing his chest. And several students remember seeing him at high school parties. As one of the highest-ranking schools in the country, Dalton drew kids from prestigious families in media and finance. One father who worked on Wall Street was so impressed by Epstein that he bluntly asked, "What are you doing teaching math at Dalton? You should be working on Wall Street." This is how Epstein was introduced to Wall Street trading legend Ace Greenberg. Greenberg was famously uninterested in hiring people with fancy degrees, and instead, people with quote, PSD degrees, which stood for poor, smart, and a deep desire to become rich. Under the mentorship of Greenberg and then Bear Stearns CEO James Kane, he excelled, quickly mastering complex pricing models at a time when options trading was a new frontier. After just 5 years, he left to start his own firm. Aside from the billion-dollar entry fee to the firm, he required clients to assign him power of attorney to control all funds, even able to supersede family members. Unlike prominent Wall Street figures such as George Soros, only rumors are known about Epstein's client list. One senior financial executive explains, "Jeff maintains some sort of money management firm, though you won't get a straight answer from him. He once told me he had 300 people working for him, and I've also heard that he manages Rockefeller money. But one never knows. It's like looking at the Wizard of Oz. There may be less there than meets the eye." Murray Gell-Mann, a Nobel Prize-winning physicist, explained that at his dinner parties, Epstein gave off the impression that his list of clients included the Queen of England. It wasn't uncommon for Epstein to invite physicists to his mansions. Prestigious academics ranging from biologists to mathematicians spoke highly of Epstein, praising his enthusiasm for scientific projects, which was inspired by his unusual aptitude for theoretical physics. This ability to easily socialize with elite scholars aligns with Marshall Rose's description of Epstein. Rose, a real estate developer who worked with him, claims he digests and decodes information very rapidly, which results in much shorter meetings. Not every meeting with Epstein was conventional, though. In one meeting at his Manhattan mansion, he invited a young professor, as well as John Brockman, a world-renowned publisher who represented prominent scientists ranging from Richard Dawkins to Nassim Taleb. Across the table sat an aspiring fashion model and her friend. According to the professor, he would alternate between them. Sometimes he'd turn to his left and ask some sciencey questions. Then, he'd turn to his right and ask the model to show him her portfolio. At some point in the meeting, a young female assistant entered the room to massage Epstein's neck. Mr. Epstein never shied away from these sorts of displays. When he invited 21 physicists to his private island in 2006, an entourage of 4 young women trailed him at all times. Roger Schenck, a cognitive psychologist who was invited to Epstein's island for a meeting on artificial intelligence, claims that during the experts' discussions, Epstein sat in the back of the room, hugging and kissing two girls on a sofa. Epstein didn't always meet with scientists in his home or island, though. After donating millions to Harvard and opening up an office nearby, he'd simply show up to its cafeteria to join in on lunchroom discussions with professors. Steven Pinker, a psychologist at Harvard University, wasn't impressed, calling him an intellectual imposter. Friends and colleagues described him to me as a quantitative genius and a scientific sophisticate, and they invited me to salons and coffee clatches at which he held court. But I found him to be a kibitzer and a dilettante. He would abruptly change the subject, ADD style, dismiss an observation with an adolescent wisecrack, and weighted his own opinions as much as scholarly literature. In one discussion at Harvard, Epstein criticized initiatives to reduce starvation because of overpopulation concerns. When Steven Pinker pushed back on this, it was made clear that he was no longer welcome at meetings with Epstein and, quote, voted off the island. According to a person familiar with the meetings, Epstein had grown tired of Pinker fact-checking him when he, quote, shot off his mouth on topics he knew nothing about, end quote. Professor Pinker, however, appeared to be an exception in his skepticism of Epstein. Likely attracted by the potential of generous grants, the number of elite scientists who at some point met with Epstein is extensive. The darker undertones in Epstein's interest in science became clearer in the early 2000s. This is when he began revealing his plan to seed the human race with his DNA. Jaron Lanier, a computer scientist and virtual reality pioneer, was invited to a meeting at Epstein's New Mexico ranch. This is where he met a scientist who worked for NASA. She explained that Jeffrey Epstein's vision was to impregnate 20 women at a time in his 33,000 square foot Zorro ranch outside Santa Fe. He got the idea from a radical human breeding experiment that took place in the 1980s, the Repository for Germinal Choice. The Repository for Germinal Choice was a sperm bank founded by millionaire eugenicist Robert Graham. Its goal was to artificially inseminate women with the sperm of geniuses to create superhumans. At least 3 Nobel laureates were confirmed as donors, but 20 years later, it shut down, its founder dead, its records sealed, and the fate of the 200 children it produced unknown. Jaron Lanier recalled seeing attractive women with exceptional academic credentials at Epstein's private dinner parties and was given the impression that they were being screened as potential candidates for his plan. Epstein also pursued other interests like cryogenics, a quasi-science that explores whether people's bodies can be frozen to be brought back to life at some point in the future. One person familiar with this plan was told that Epstein wanted his head and penis to be frozen. Another project he bankrolled aimed to identify an unspecified particle that could trigger the feeling that someone was watching you. These transhumanist interests might simply appear to be the grandiose pet projects of an eccentric billionaire. Perhaps scientists only humored him in the hope of receiving generous donations. But Jeffrey Epstein's friendships to the world's most powerful politicians and celebrities only invites more serious questions.
Welcome to the Southern White House.
Since becoming president, Donald Trump has branded Mar-a-Lago the Southern White House, a place that entertains foreign leaders, where military strikes are ordered, and whose terrace served as an open-air situation room over dessert.
And we had the most beautiful piece of chocolate cake that you've ever seen.
But in the 90s, Mar-a-Lago was Trump's South Florida party palace, one frequented by Jeffrey Epstein, who is facing charges for sex trafficking. He has pleaded not guilty. The president says his relationship with Epstein was no different than anyone else in their elite circle.
Well, I knew him like everybody in Palm Beach knew him. He was a fixture in Palm Beach. I don't think I've spoken to him for 15 years. I wasn't a fan.
Yet, a tape in the NBC archives of a Mar-a-Lago party shows Trump giving Epstein his personal attention.
Donald! Donald! Donald!
The footage, shot in November of 1992, before Trump opened the resort as a club, shows the future president surrounded by cheerleaders for the Buffalo Bills and Miami Dolphins, capturing Trump's fun-loving bachelor lifestyle for an appearance on Faith Daniels' NBC talk show.
We're going to get great ratings in your show.
Trump is surrounded by women as music blares in the background. After a while, Trump goes to greet 3 new guests, among them the financier Jeffrey Epstein.
Come on in. Go inside.
More than a decade before his guilty plea on state prostitution charges. Later in the footage, Trump is seen talking to Epstein and another man as women are dancing in front of them. Trump alternates between dancing and pointing out women to Epstein and the other man and telling Epstein about the cameras. Though exactly what they say is difficult to understand as they discuss the women and their appearances, Trump gestures to one and appears to say to Epstein, "Look at her back there. She's hot." And then Trump says something else into Epstein's ear that makes him double over with laughter. But as the president says now, he never liked Epstein.
I was not a fan of his. That I can tell you. I was not a fan of his.
I've known Jeff for 15 years, terrific guy. He's a lot of fun to be with. It's even said that he likes beautiful women as much as I do, and many of them are on the younger side. No doubt about it, Jeffrey enjoys his social life.
The facts of this case date way back to the mid-2000s, when local Palm Beach authorities were investigating Epstein on allegations of similar sexual activity. Epstein was being investigated by both state and federal authorities in Florida. Epstein agreed to plead guilty to solicitation of prostitution in state court in Florida and served just over a year, not in prison, but on work release, where he was allowed to leave the facilities 6 out of 7 days of the week. But the federal government stayed its hand, deciding to instead enter into a non-prosecution agreement, with the idea being that the state prosecution was adequate and no federal prosecution was necessary. Even though Epstein is a registered sex offender, many observers felt his legal team had achieved a huge victory, especially because Epstein's case never even went to trial. For the most part, the Epstein case appeared to be a done deal. But last year, the Miami Herald started investigating the Epstein case and interviewing victims, publishing stories of their accounts.
We were underage. We were little girls.
He wanted new, fresh, young faces every single day.
He's probably the most prolific pedophile. I mean, to have abused this many young girls for this many years and have gotten away with it.
The Herald's reporting re-energized public interest in the case, including the interest of prosecutors in New York. Adding broader political intrigue to this case, Alex Acosta, who is now President Trump's Secretary of Labor, was then the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of Florida who approved this original plea agreement.
Mr. President, do you have any concerns about the Labor Secretary's handling of the Jeffrey Epstein case?
I really don't know too much about it. I know he's done a great job as Labor Secretary, and that seems like a long time ago.
Epstein certainly ran in influential circles. Even then private citizen Donald Trump praised Epstein back in the day. So what's next? Epstein is facing very serious federal charges, 2 counts with a mandatory minimum of 10 years on each count. This is the kind of thing that makes associates of Epstein very nervous, because if the government is interested, they may approach Epstein for a cooperation agreement. Given that Epstein's friends were almost exclusively the rich and influential, the folks that he could talk to the government about might make him an appealing cooperating witness. Generally speaking, federal trials move relatively quickly, but this case may be over even sooner if Epstein tries to secure a cooperation agreement with the prosecutors. The real question is, who can Epstein give up to get that prosecution agreement? This new federal case may bring closure to some of Epstein's victims who complain that they weren't even told about this non-prosecution agreement in 2007.
She was the air hostess on board the notorious Lolita Express, the billionaire's private jet at the center of a sex scandal making lurid headlines across the world. Sleazy Wall Street tycoon Jeffrey Epstein used the Lolita Express to ferry a bevy of beautiful young women. Among the passengers, former President Bill Clinton and Britain's Prince Andrew.
On almost every trip that I did go on, there were young girls around.
In this Inside Edition exclusive, Shantae Davies takes us inside the secret world of the Lolita Express, named for the controversial book and movie about a professor's infatuation with an underage girl. Shantae made several trips on Jeffrey Epstein's infamous Lolita Express. She says she was one of several young, attractive women hired to travel around the world, giving massages or yoga instruction to Epstein and his rich and powerful friends. When Shantae was hired, she was a struggling 22-year-old actress. She once played a lingerie model in a movie called Exposed.
These designs are really great.
Shantae worked as a masseuse, but says she never had sex with Epstein.
Did you ever think that maybe more was going on than simple massages?
Looking back, of course.
Was there a bed on the airplane?
Actually, yes, there was, yeah.
On one memorable flight on board a plane like this provided by Air Hollywood, she says she made peanut butter and jelly sandwiches for passengers, including Oscar winner Kevin Spacey, actor Chris Tucker, and even Bill Clinton. They were all flying to Africa on a humanitarian mission, and Jeffrey Epstein had given them the use of his jet.
So you never gave President Clinton a massage?
No, I didn't.
Shantae says when the plane landed in Africa, Clinton took her shopping, but she says nothing improper occurred.
They had shut down a jewelry store for us, and I helped him pick out a bracelet for Chelsea.
It was a jet-set lifestyle for sure, but Shantae says she felt uncomfortable about being part of Epstein's collection of young women.
You saw young women around Jeffrey Epstein, and they didn't seem to have regular jobs, and you started wondering, why are they here?
Yes, yes.
When you look back, are there red flags that you should have seen at the time?
Definitely, yeah. Why fly anyone out to be a masseuse when there's plenty of masseuses in the same city that you're in?
Epstein served 13 months in prison for soliciting an underage girl for prostitution. Now just looking at the front page headlines the scandal has generated brings Shantae to tears.
To have to deal with that and then on top of it defend my character, I'll have children one day, you know, and they'll read this.
She wonders whether she'll ever be able to live down her time on the Lolita Express.
More than anything, I just felt stupid. Yeah, I felt duped.
I was young, I was scared, I knew these people were powerful. I didn't know what would happen if I said no. I didn't know what would happen if I reported them. That 16-year-old girl just let it happen. And that was how I got into the abuse with Jeffrey and Ghislaine.
Virginia Roberts was working in the spa at Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago club in Palm Beach when British socialite Ghislaine Maxwell introduced her to multimillionaire Jeffrey Epstein.
The training started immediately. I mean, it was everything down to how to give a blowjob, how to be quiet, be subservient, give Jeffrey what he wants. A lot of this training came from Ghislaine herself. And being a woman, it kind of surprises you that a woman could actually let stuff like that happen, but not only let it happen, but to groom you into doing it. And then there's Jeffrey who's telling you, I want it this way, no, go slower, and don't do that, and do this. You're just thrown into a world that you don't understand, and you don't know how to, you're screaming on the inside and you don't know how to let it come out. And you just become this numb figure who refuses to feel and refuses to speak and refuses, all you do is obey. That's it. And eventually it led to, well, now we're gonna experiment and we're gonna try you with another guy and see how you go. So they sent me to an island with a professor, and I basically had to do what I did for Jeffrey for him. So it's very private. It's the perfect world for a billionaire getting away with what he was doing. He could hold big parties there and have huge orgies there, and nobody would have any idea what was going on because it was so quiet and so protected. And it started with one, and then it trickled into two, and then so on and so forth. And you know, before you know it, I'm being lent out to politicians and to academics and to people that royalty.
Roberts claimed in an affidavit the two of the men that Epstein lent her out to were attorney Alan Dershowitz and Prince Andrew, the Duke of York. Dershowitz and Prince Andrew have both denied any involvement with Roberts. A judge later struck Roberts' affidavit from the court record, but the ruling did not address the veracity of her allegations. Dershowitz said he was nonetheless vindicated. Logs from Epstein's private jet, nicknamed the Lolita Express, show a host of high-powered politicians, academics, and celebrities.
It's called Lolita Express for a reason. That was a vessel for him to be able to abuse girls and get away with it without anybody being alarmed or any alarm bells going off. It was all the same no matter where you went. All Jeffrey cared about was, go find me more girls. To me, still to this day, it is my biggest shame that I carry around that I will never get rid of. And I'm really, really sad that I brought other girls my age and even younger into a world that they should have never been introduced to.
At age 19, Robert said that she was sent to Thailand to take a massage course and to pick up a girl for Epstein. Instead, she fell in love and moved to Australia, where she and her husband live with their 3 children.
I escaped. I called Jeffrey to let him know that I was not coming back and I was not bringing the little Thai girl back. And he said, you know what, have a nice life, and hung up the phone. And that was it. And I thought, I'm off the hook, I'm off the chain, I can go, I can live free. 2007, I was pregnant with my middle son. And I get a phone call from Guylaine one day in Australia. I'm in Australia. I was like, how the hell did she just find me? Like, I've been out of their life for so long. What's going on? She's like, have you talked to anybody? Have you told anybody what's happened? Like, you know, have you reported us or anything? And I said, no. I haven't spoken to anybody. Okay, good. You stay like that. You stay quiet. The next day, Jeffrey calls me with his lawyer on the phone. And he asks me the same questions. Have you talked to anybody? Are you going to report me? Are you going to talk to anybody? And I'm like, where is this all coming from? Like, what is going on? The next day, I get another phone call. And this time, it's from an FBI agent. Like, hi, I'm blah, blah, blah from the FBI. Have you given Jeffrey Epstein a blowjob? Did you have a shower with Jeffrey Epstein? Did you ever bring any girls over for Jeffrey Epstein? I'm like, I don't even know who you are. I mean, unless you can come over here and show me some official documentation that says that you're with the FBI, I am not saying a word to you. And about 6 months later, I get a knock at the door, and it's the Australian Federal Police. It was like a 12-page document about Jeffrey Epstein and what he had done and how, you know, I was a victim and they've identified me as one. It takes a long time to start the healing process. I mean, I will never heal. There are pieces from me that can never be put back together. It takes so long to get to a point where you're able just to speak about it. I mean, it took me having a daughter and looking at this beautiful, young, innocent baby to say, I want to speak out about it now. You know, if we can make that point across, that doesn't matter how rich you are, it doesn't matter how powerful you are, there are girls out there that will speak up, and I don't care if it's 10 years later or 15 years later, whenever you're ready to do it, you do it. You know, and you protect the ones that are younger than us. You protect the ones that we didn't protect before. These guys will get it in the end, because us girls are not going to sit here and just let this keep happening.
Jeffrey Epstein leaving his New York townhouse with a young woman. An hour later, Prince Andrew appears at the door with another young woman, opening it just slightly to wave her off. It's the emergence of this footage which sparked an unusually swift response from Buckingham Palace. The pictures are from 2010, more than a decade after Epstein and Prince Andrew met, and just 2 years after Epstein pleaded guilty to 1 count of solicitation of prostitution and 1 count of solicitation of prostitution of a minor. This avoided any federal charges which could have seen him face life in prison. Instead, he controversially received an 18-month sentence. The seriousness of the charges and the high-profile nature of the case left his reputation destroyed, and many of his high-profile friends, including Donald Trump, shunned him, but not Prince Andrew. Epstein was put on the sex offenders register in Florida and New York after his conviction. However, Prince Andrew persisted in his friendship with him. And there's also the now famous picture of the prince with his arm around Virginia Roberts in 2001, who claimed in US court documents that Prince Andrew had sex with her at the age of 17, something always emphatically denied by the palace, and the allegation was rejected by the US courts. The relationship of the sex offender and the prince has drawn worldwide attention. After the release of these new pictures, Buckingham Palace said His Royal Highness deplores the exploitation of any human being, and the suggestion he would condone, participate in, or encourage any such behaviour is abhorrent. One thing is incontrovertible. Prince Andrew continued his acquaintance with a known sex offender long after it became public, something that's still been left unexplained by both the palace and Prince Andrew. Despite Epstein's death, the investigation and its ramifications are far from over, and this will worry the royal family.
Well, joining us now from Norwich is former BBC royal correspondent Michael Coe. Good evening, Michael Coe. First of all,
good evening.
What do you make of the speed of the palace's response?
Outraged denial will not work. Answers are needed. The truth is required. You've put some of the cogent questions that need to be addressed. This is a very serious matter. It's going to become more serious. It's going to become worse for the Prince and worse for Buckingham Palace, because there are likely to be at least one and maybe more civil cases in America. That puts the Prince into the American legal system. This is not something that can be given to Scotland Yard to be buried. It is not something that will come up before Her Majesty's justices in the Royal Courts of Justice to be argued about by Queen's Counsel. This is going to go through the American court system. And in America, as you well know, Kirsty, they say with some justice that however high you may be, the law is above you. And this is already happening. Lawyers in America are asking the Prince to give depositions. That is the beginning of the process. It would be far better for him to address these matters right now.
Yes, so basically US lawyers who are operating on behalf of the alleged victims they're asking him simply to help them to find out more about what Epstein was up to, what kind of person he was. But there's no question of any kind of extradition or anything like that. It would be unthinkable to have something like that. What you're suggesting is it would do Prince Andrew good to go voluntarily if requested.
Yes, that is indeed what the American lawyers are saying and is being reported this evening. The fact of the matter is that he is a prime witness in these matters. Perhaps nobody is better situated to comment on these matters. He was the man inside the house. He was the man in the Mews House in London. He was in the pictures. He was there at the material times.
Well, I want to come on and talk to
what the lawyers in America are saying.
Sorry, I want to come on and talk to you about a Daily Mail story tomorrow morning. Before I do that, just very quickly from your vast experience, what about these stories that surfaced the last few days, you know, a very immaculately timed stories, or a flurry about a getting together again of Sarah Ferguson and Prince Andrew? It seemed too good to be true timing-wise.
Well, that's their personal affairs. I think, to be honest, that's froth and is immaterial. I think, though, if he's wise, he should take advice of his daughters. After all, you must remember, at the time these alleged offences took place, the Prince's own daughters were about the same age as some of these alleged victims of Jeffrey Epstein, now deceased. And I think anybody, any decent person, albeit a prince of the royal blood, would hesitate to still maintain relationship with, a close relationship with somebody who'd already been convicted of fairly vile crimes.
In the Daily Mail tomorrow morning, it says Epstein's flight record raises yet more questions for Andrew. This is further linkage between the two men. Does that, in your view, put further pressure on Prince Andrew?
Well, this is what's going to happen, Kirsty. There's going to be a drip feed. Bit by bit, the information is going to come out. And you know, and your listeners know, and your viewers know, that it's not the offence that gets them in the end, it's the cover-up. And to avoid the cover-up, candour, openness, truthfulness, right now, that might actually save the situation. And if I were giving Prince Andrew, for whom I have some regard, I might say, and I liked him in his younger days, and he served this country well in the Falklands War, and he put himself into real danger, flying a helicopter as a decoy for Exocet missiles, so let's give him credit. If I were advising him now, which I'm not, I would say to him, take some advice from your lawyers, but see as if you can, do your best to answer and address these questions, because nothing else will lay this matter to rest.
Michael Cole, thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Project Veritas released some footage yesterday of ABC News reporter Amy Robach lamenting on a hot mic that ABC News killed a story she had developed of alleged Jeffrey Epstein victim Virginia Roberts on tape years ago, leveling accusations not only against the now dead financier, but implicating a member of the British royal family, Prince Andrew. She also had detailed reporting on connections between Epstein and former President Bill Clinton. Let's take a listen to the whole thing.
I've had the story for 3 years. I've had this interview with Virginia Roberts. We would not put it on the air. First of all, I was told, who's Jeffrey Epstein? No one knows who that is. This is a stupid story. Then the palace found out that we had her whole allegations about Prince Andrew and threatened us a million different ways. We were so afraid we wouldn't be able to interview Kate and Will that also quashed the story. And then Alan Dershowitz was also implicated in it because of the planes. She told me everything. She had pictures. She had everything. She was in hiding for 12 years. We convinced her to come out. We convinced her to talk to us. It was unbelievable what we had. Clinton. We had everything. I tried for 3 years to get it on, to no avail, and now it's all coming out, and it's like these new revelations, and I freaking had all of it. I'm so pissed right now. Like, every day I get more and more pissed because I'm just like, oh my God, it was what we had was unreal. Other women backing it up. Hey, yep. Brad Edwards, the attorney, 3 years ago, saying there will come a day when we will realize Jeffrey Epstein was the most prolific pedophile this country has ever known. And I had it all 3 years ago.
Robach's horrifying story. It contains all the same ingredients of NBC News' alleged cover-up of Harvey Weinstein, detailed by the enterprising journalist Ronan Farrow. The British royal family began exerting immense pressure on ABC News, who was desperate at the time to score an interview with Will and Kate. In other words, ABC News bosses killed a story about a sexual predator to preserve their relationship with the powerful. A side note, back in August, NPR also reported on ABC News quashing that story. But the ABC thing is the type of behind-the-scenes revelations that we all know happens daily. It is rarely captured so vividly on the screen. ABC is of course denying the story in some language you may find very familiar. First, they released a hostage statement from Robach, who was allegedly caught in a moment of private frustration, and that she could not obtain sufficient corroborating evidence to meet editorial standards. She also says nobody at ABC ever told her to stop investigating Epstein. ABC released their own statement side by side, saying Robach's reporting did not meet their standards to air and that they never stopped investigating the story. This is, of course, complete BS. Robach lays it out in the video. Her bosses told her, quote, nobody knows who this guy is in relation to Epstein. You don't think that's basically in order to stand down? ABC's explanation is literally exactly the same as NBC's pathetic excuse for not airing its Harvey Weinstein reporting, that the reporting did not meet the standards for air. And let me tell you what is newsworthy alone. It's this photo. That is a photo of a member of the British royal family with his arms wrapped around a 17-year-old girl at the residence of a known sexual predator. Do you have any more questions? Every single one of us knows why ABC News did not run this story and why NBC News killed this story into Harvey Weinstein. They wanted to preserve their relationship with the powerful. If they ran it, how else would things like this happen? Former Bill Clinton staffer at ABC star George Stephanopoulos once had dinner with Prince Andrew at Jeffrey Epstein's New York mansion in 2010 to discuss, well, of course, the upcoming wedding of Kate Middleton and Prince William. This is 2 years after Epstein was given his sweetheart deal by Florida prosecutors, but he was still required to register as a sex offender. What is the chief anchor for ABC News, the host of CBS Evening News Katie Couric, CBS's Charlie Rose, Woody Allen, and Chelsea Handler all doing there too? I think we all know the answer to that. They were cozying up to power, solidifying the base that Epstein had used and would continue to use for years in order to cover up his horrific crimes. This story is important for many reasons. Not only does it demonstrate beyond a shadow of a doubt that our corporate media giants not only defend the powerful when it comes to the things that may hurt their collective bottom lines, but they will stop at nothing even to cover up a whole host of crimes. The important thing to remember is what the media outlets like ABC News and NBC News choose to cover when they're quashing stories into Jeffrey Epstein or Harvey Weinstein. Story selection is the most pernicious form of media bias. What they choose not to show you is more important than what they do choose to show you. And that's the thing, Crystal, is, I mean, nobody knows who this guy is. Why does this even matter? Or this isn't an important story. This is a stupid story.
Literally the exact same things they told Ronan Farrow.
Same thing. It's like they were reading from the same script. And that's, like I said, we all know this happens every day. How many other people has this happened to? How many other stories are sitting in a vault, in an ABC News or an NBC News vault, of crimes, of powerful people that they wanted to preserve their relationship with? That's why this is so important. And look how deep the cronyism and the rot goes.
Yeah.
George Stephanopoulos, Katie Couric, they're all having dinner at this guy's house 2 years after he's a required a registered sex offender.
Yep.
They don't care.
I mean, and don't forget that detail from Ronan Farrow's story, alleged detail, let's say, where at the time that Ronan was doing this reporting on Harvey Weinstein, he was also trying to get a sit down with Hillary Clinton about foreign policy.
Absolutely.
Email from Nick Merrill basically threatening if you don't lay off this Harvey Weinstein story, Weinstein being a big donor to Clinton, you're not going to get your story. And same dynamic here. We're worried the palace is freaking out. We're worried about access to Will and Kate for a sit-down interview. And this is what happens, number one, when you have so-called journalistic outlets that are really about the capitalistic bottom line, and the bottom line is the bottom line, and you have access journalism where they're more concerned about preserving their friendship and their relationships with the powerful than they are holding them to account. And this is what Matt Taibbi says. He says the media is basically turned into courtiers rather than oppositional figures who are supposed to be holding these people accountable.
He's right.
And that's the reality.
He's absolutely right, which is they are more the allies of the people they're supposed to cover than they are on the opposition. And it's just so enraging because I go and I look at what are some of the stories that ABC and NBC did choose to put out there, right? In the meantime, while all this was happening, and yet they have these things that are sitting in their vault, explosive allegations, and it's because that these people were Democratic donors and had cozied up to the liberal, establishment. That's why they get protected. Yeah. That's why ABC News, the chief anchor is a former campaign staffer for Bill Clinton, a White House staffer. It's like we just forget that. We're like, oh, well, he's a newsman through and through. It's like, no. Like, do we forget the origin story of George Stephanopoulos? So many of these things are just, it's
well, and the establishment of both sides are really on the same team.
Yeah, they are.
Is the bottom line as well. And so as long as you're preserving access to these halls and lanes of power and being able to get your little tidbits and get your big sit downs and, go to your cocktail parties, then it's all good. And we should say, look, this is, and this is what I said when we were talking about the Ronan Farrow allegations as well. Yes, this is about NBC News, but it's about so much more than that.
It's way bigger than
because it's so much more difficult, so much more uncomfortable to go after the powerful. So what do? They do exposés on like the local Chinese restaurant or whatever, to people who can't fight back. And when it's the powerful, when it's people with money, access, and influence, then they find every excuse in the book to keep the public from learning the truth.
Exactly. How do you look at that photo of Prince Andrew with a 17-year-old girl at Epstein's house and not publish that?
Nothing to see here.
I don't. That's gaslighting before your very eyes.
Next on Rising, Senate Democrats are distancing themselves from Elizabeth Warren's Medicare for All plan, creating doubt as to whether or not the bill would become law in a Warren administration.
Coming up, we're going to sit down with journalist Zed Jelani to dissect that plan as well as its reception when Rising rolls on.
We're on a mission from God. Hit it.
Lord works in mysterious ways.
Yep.
How are you today, sir?
Okay, how's it going?
Fine, thank you.
Thank you for watching Hidden Hand. Let me know what you think below. One love, one vibration.